Hi. Um, Today I wanted to talk about the mind-body connection, but I want to talk about it in a way that most people probably don't consider or think about. And I think for most of us, we are pretty convinced that what happens in our bodies has an effect on our minds. And if you look into a lot of the different medical, I don't know, research or papers or articles, they talk a lot about what happens in the body and how it affects our mind. They talk about body chemistry. They talk about if you're not feeling well, then it has an effect on your mind. And what I don't hear very often is the other way around and how the mind has an effect on the body. And what I want to talk about today is how the mind has an effect on the body. Probably, maybe even more so than the body affects the mind. So I don't know if I've said this before, but if I haven't, I'm going to say it today. I talk to a lot of people and they talk about their mind, and I ask them what their mind is. And 9 times out of 10, people will respond and say that their mind is their brain. Like they talk about my brain doesn't think right, or my brain has me considering this or thinking about that or feeling like this or that. And what I share with people is the possibility that the mind and the brain are not the same thing, that the brain is biological, it's there, it's in our skull, and it's running this beautiful thing that we walk around in. But our mind, to my mind, is spiritual. There's no form to our mind. And I use this one a lot. And I said, look, if I died tomorrow, which hopefully doesn't happen, during the autopsy, the medical examiner could take my brain and put it in a jar and put a label on it that says Patty's brain. But the medical examiner could not put my mind in a jar with a label that says Patty's mind because there's no form to that. So in my world of the three principles of mind, consciousness, and thought, the mind is spiritual. It has no form and therefore cannot be broken. It's like you can't break air, right? You can damage your brain, yes, but you can't damage your mind. And the thing about your mind is that you live in your mind. We all live in our minds. We all live a life that is psychological. We can only ever experience what's happening in our mind in any given moment. And a lot of times people will say, well, that's not true because I feel things. I see things, I hear things, I taste things. And that's true. But here's something that most people don't consider. Even your senses, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, even those senses do not dictate our experience. Let me explain. If you've ever, and I've done this, like sat in a lawn chair and you're sitting there reading a book, maybe I've done this, sit there reading a book, and I'm reading a book, and then all of a sudden I happen to notice there's an insect crawling on my arm. I didn't notice it before. I was too busy reading. My focus was on my reading. My thinking was on my reading. But as soon as I noticed the bug crawling on me, it like freaks me out. And who knows how long that bug was crawling on there before it finally came into my awareness, right? And this happens all the time. People will say, to me, I'll be really busy at work. And someone will say, oh God, do you smell that? Like, smell what? Oh yeah, okay, now I smell that. But if things in our environment, including the things that we can taste, touch, smell, hear, the five senses, until those things come into our awareness and we have a thought about them, we don't actually experience them. So I invite you to consider for yourself, have you ever had an experience where you didn't notice something? something was happening physically that you didn't even recognize as happening. You had no awareness of it because you hadn't had a thought about it. And it's possible that you can probably come up with at least one example. And so the mind-body connection works that way. If I'm not thinking about it, if it's not in my awareness, I'm not having an experience of it. If I am thinking about something that isn't actually happening in the world, then my body experiences it as if I am. Here's an example. And here's something I learned recently. So, spoiler alert, it's going to get a little gross here for a second. So I apologize in advance. But I did a course once about anxiety. And I was explaining to people that our experience of life, whatever we experience in the moment, can only come from what we think about in the moment. We think about it, and then this lovely thing that's called consciousness makes it happen, makes it so in our bodies. So I was explaining this to this class, and one of the women said, okay, I get what you're saying until things become physical. Okay, so if I'm thinking, what I was explaining was anxiety is a lot of fast thinking that you may not even be aware of. And you start to feel palpitations and sweaty hands. That's how we experience anxiety, but it starts as thinking, whether we realize it or not. And she could kind of see that, but she has a situation where when she gets really nervous about something, she's running off to the bathroom. And I've had that same experience where you get really wound up about going somewhere or doing something or being with a person or having to have a conversation. And then your gut starts to get a little wonky and you're off to the bathroom, right? Well, here's what I've recently learned. What I've recently learned is one of the things the brain will do when the sympathetic nervous system is activated enough is it will evacuate your bowels, because you can't run and you can't fight with a full bowel. Imagine that. But something outside of us doesn't actually have to be happening in order for that mechanism, that message from the brain to the bowel to happen, right? We can be sitting there thinking about an upcoming event or an upcoming conversation or somewhere we need to go. And we can be thinking about it really intensely to the point that the brain believes that we're in danger, and then you're off to the bathroom. So what it looks like a lot of times is, if let's just pretend you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody and you're thinking about it and how's it going to go and what are they going to say and what am I going to say and what's the outcome going to be and how am I going to feel when all of this happens, and you get so wound up in your mind that your body's sending you off to the bathroom. It looks like this conversation you have to have with this person is what's making you nervous, making you have to run off to the restroom. But that's not actually the case, because the conversation isn't even happening in real life. It's happening in your mind 100%, but it's not actually happening in the moment. You're not actually having this conversation with this person. You're thinking about it, you're imagining it, and you're imagining it so well and so thoroughly that your body feels that it's real and it responds exactly the way it thinks it needs to, because it thinks you're in danger. So my point of this conversation today is that we rarely realize the power of thought, the power of what we do in our minds, whether we're realizing we're doing it or not. We don't always appreciate the power of thought. It oftentimes looks like our thoughts are something outside of us. And I just recently heard it put that particular way. And I thought, that is so true. How many times have I been in my mind thinking something, and it seems like my thinking is outside of me, making me feel, making me respond, making me react. when really all that thinking is going on in my mind. It's kind of fascinating. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about this today because I think it's an innocent misunderstanding. It's something that I'm seeing more and more for myself. And I think it's really helpful to realize the power of thought. And if we're not always looking to our body and the way our body is affecting our mind, if we start to shift the paradigm a little bit and get curious and consider that it might be possible that our mind is actually affecting our body far more than our body's affecting our mind, we might start to see some things. We might start to have some epiphanies, aha moments, insights into, oh, I'm doing this by the way I'm using my mind right now, not on purpose. I'm not doing this on purpose, but just from the perspective of that's how it works. That's really how it works. If we think it, we feel it. And the more we think it, the more we feel it. And eventually, it's very possible that we have physical responses because the brain, in all of its wisdom, believes that we're in danger. And it does what it needs to do to keep us safe because that's the brain's major job, keeping us safe, moving our bodies and keeping us safe. That's why we have it. Because, geez, where would we be without our brain? Anyway, I just want to talk about that today. Hopefully, what I said made sense. Hopefully, it gives you pause and some time to do a little consideration of the possibility that it may be that if you're having physical symptoms of one form or another, like feelings of anxiety, feelings of sadness, feelings of depression, feelings and reactions of stress, having to run off to the bathroom when you're not really in a dangerous situation, but you are thinking about it. It may shift something inside of you if you just see that as a possibility or see that as truth. Because seeing it shifts it, changes it, makes it different. And I'll tell you a quick story, and I may have told this story before, so forgive me. But I can remember years ago, I used to walk the beach a lot. And I was walking the beach, and it was a very long beach. And somewhere in the middle of the beach, far away from the restrooms, all of a sudden, I needed to use the restroom. And it was a struggle to get from point A to point B. It was a struggle to get back to the restroom, um, you know, before it was too late. Let's just say it that way. And what was really fascinating about that was now I'd been doing this walking the beach thing for probably a year or two, never had a problem. But after that one incident, every time I'd walk the beach, I would get halfway down and I'd have to run back to the restroom again. And I think what happened was it's kind of like when you touch a hot stove, right? You touch a hot stove and then your brain remembers, oh, don't touch that hot stove. That's a bad thing. And you avoid touching the hot stove, right? Well, it's kind of like I got into this habit where every time I took a walk, I had some thinking about what if I get halfway down the beach? What if I can't make it back to the restroom? You know, I had that thinking going on. It might not have been conscious thinking, but somewhere in the background, I knew it was there, even though I tried not to have it. In fact, trying not to have it made it worse. So what happened? Well, every time I'd walk the beach for quite a while, I was dealing with this situation. And then I took a hiatus from walking the beach. I moved, I wasn't living as close anymore. And it was probably a good couple of years. And I finally went back to the beach to take a walk. And guess what? I didn't have any problem. It wasn't on my mind anymore. I'd completely forgotten about it, didn't even exist. So it wasn't the beach that gave me the problem. It was my thinking about being on the beach and the what ifs that were up here that were causing me a problem. Just food for thought. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, reach out. I would love to hear from you, and I'd love to talk more about the mind-body connection because it's a powerful thing. It's a powerful thing, whether we realize it or not. All right. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I will talk to you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.